Okay, moving on to the last and final segment of today's show. There is a team I wanted to talk about that I believe has really started to hit a stride. They've really started to turn a corner, and they've really started to hit a groove, and that is Brad Underwood and his Illinois Fighting Illini. And I am someone that has been pretty high on Illinois coming since the start of the season, coming into the season, and Illinois has been very up and down, but over the last couple of games, they have really started to peak, they've really started to play much better, and in the most recent top 25 that came out, the Illinois Fighting Illini are now ranked number 6. And Illinois has been a team that throughout the season, they've had their good moments and they've had their bad moments. They went into Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke and won by 15. They had some other really nice wins against Indiana, against Purdue, against Iowa a couple days ago, against Indiana on the road, against Wisconsin. Illinois has had some really nice wins, but they've also had some unfortunate losses. They lost to Missouri, they lost to Maryland, they lost to Ohio State, they lost to Rutgers, and there were many times early on throughout the regular season, the early portion, I should say, of non-conference play. There were many times where there were many people throughout the college basketball media that were saying, okay, Illinois was out here ranked number 5, number 6 in the country preseason, and they're losing a game to Missouri. They're losing a game to Rutgers. Are they living up to the hype? Are they as good as we all said they were? And there were many people that said, oh, come on now. You know, they're not. They can't be. They're Illinois. This is a team that hasn't won an NCAA tournament game in what feels like since 2005 when that team went all the way to the national championship game and lost to North Carolina. Come on now. But at the same time, when you look at Illinois and the way this team is constructed, I have been someone that has been on the Illinois bandwagon for a while now. And if you remember, a couple weeks ago, I went on this show, and it was right after Illinois lost to Ohio State at home. And that was the second, not only the second game in a row that Illinois had lost, but it was the second home game in a row that Illinois had lost. And I remember going on this show and saying, look, Illinois fans, I totally understand why you're so frustrated. The team is super talented, and there is no reason to believe that this team should be better than this. There is a reason, I should say. There are many reasons to believe that Illinois should not be this bad. And since that game against Ohio State, the Illini have now won 4 in a row, and I think from a team effort perspective, they are just playing with much more consistency. We know some of the main reasons why the Illinois Fighting Illini were so good and so highly regarded heading into the season were because of the inside-outside duo of Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn. And against Wisconsin on Saturday, in a game where, let's face facts, Wisconsin was playing like the desperate team. They went into this game as the desperate team. They went into this game as a team that had been really struggling and as a team that somehow, some way needed to find a way to get a W. And Illinois' best 2 players, Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn, were just like, nope, that is absolutely not going to happen, impose their will, and there really was not a second throughout that whole game against Wisconsin where you watched Illinois and said, okay, these guys aren't winning, and that is super, super impressive. In the game against Indiana, did Illinois play their best game? No. But the good thing is, neither did Indiana, and the Illini somehow, someway found a way to win. And let's face facts, Indiana, I think from start to finish, you could make the argument, was the better team in that game, but Illinois was just hanging around and hanging around. They were down by like 5-6 points really throughout all of the second half, and they somehow found a way to send the game into overtime, and we all know what happened after that. Illinois goes into Assembly Hall and beats the Hoosiers. And then prior to that, they had a big-time home win against Iowa. Even I remember watching that game And that was obviously prior to those 2 wins I'd mentioned against Indiana and Wisconsin. But in that game against Iowa, I remember watching Illinois and just saying to myself, okay, wow, that is the team that is playing at the level that many people projected them to. That this is the team that was ranked by many people in the top 8 or the top 10 before the season started, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. So Illinois is definitely a team I'm going to be keeping my eye on going forward. And besides the inside-outside duo that I mentioned that has been super dynamic throughout the season, I like some of the other role players Illinois has and what they have been doing lately. You start off with Trent Frazier. Trent Frazier has been a guy that has came to Illinois along with Brad Underwood. He is a 4th-year senior, and people forget that Trent Frazier was really the heart and soul of this Illinois Fighting Illini team before Ayo DeSumo had arrived to Champaign, before Kofi Coburn had arrived to Champaign, and there was a time where Trent Frazier was really the Fighting Illini's go-to scorer and go-to bucket getter, but when you combine him along with Ayo DeSumo and Kofi Coburn and the roles that each player out of that trio has in the offense, he has taken a little bit of a step back compared to his first year in Champaign. But you saw on Tuesday night against Indiana at Assembly Hall, he was like, okay, my numbers being called, my team needs my instant offense in order to get the W, and that's exactly what he did. He was able to step up in order to make the team win, and he hit a couple threes. He was deadly, and there was a stretch where Indiana was up by 6, and then literally 30 seconds later, after 2 straight Trent Frazier threes, bang, bang, Illinois ties the game, and we know what ended up happening there. The game ends up going into double OT, and the Illini end up getting the W. Even the freshmen, Adam Miller and Andre Curbelo. And I want to talk about Andre Curbelo because you're going to look at Andre Curbelo's numbers as a true freshman, and you're going to say, okay, credit to him for being able to get on the floor as a true freshman, averaging about 21 minutes a game, 8 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, about 4.5 assists per game. Good for him. But at the same time, those numbers aren't really going to pop out at you. But at the same time, if you are an Illinois fan and you watch this team on a night in and night out basis, it will seem evident to you just how important of a player Andre Curbelo is to this Illinois Fighting Illini team. He is so impactful on the defensive side of the ball, as he is averaging 1.1 steals per game, which is super impactful to Illinois. That is one of the main reasons I believe this team goes, as sometimes one of the weaknesses that Illinois does have is their ability to create in half court in the offensive side of the ball. They could get cold from the offensive side of the ball when they're stuck in the half court. So what is the best way to get over a flaw like that? Easy. It's just creating as much turnovers as you possibly can. And when a guy like Andre Curbelo is on the floor, that is how Illinois does that. Another thing I wanted to say about Illinois is that they have to get Kofi Coburn going. We all know that when Illinois is at their best, it's when Kofi is really imposing himself physically, and he's really proving to be a physical threat that is really a problem for the other teams in the Big Ten to guard. And we know that sometimes over the last couple of years, Brad Underwood has had a little bit of an issue in terms of the big men rotation, and Kofi and Georgi Bashanishvili. Georgie, kind of in a similar way to Trent Frazier that I mentioned earlier, he's, I think, had to take a little bit of a step back in terms of the big man and which one starts, because in today's modern day of college basketball, you cannot really have 2 7-footers that have no real threat of shooting and creating a three-point shot off the dribble whatsoever. And it's unfortunate to Georgie, but yeah, he's had to take a little bit of a step back to Kofi Coburn, because Brad Underwood knows that in order for the Fighting Illini to be at their best, Kofi Coburn has to be front and center at the head of the snake for Illinois. And the good news, if you're an Illini fan, was that on Saturday, it looked really really good and really easy for Coburn as he got into double figures, finished with 23 points and 14 rebounds as the Illini had their largest rebounding advantage in a Big Ten game since 2010-2011. They out-rebounded Wisconsin 46-19, and that's another great sign if you're a fan of the Illini that your team was really able to impose their strength. And if you have Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn really being able to elevate your Illini team, that's a really good sign if you're a fan of the Illini. And I feel like watching this game against Wisconsin, it was every time Illinois was able to get a rebound, they were able to just put the ball right back into the basket and really impose their strength nicely. And Kofi Coburn, he was able to hold his own against Luka Garza when Illinois was able to face Iowa. He was really able to hold his own against Trayce Jackson-Davis when Illinois was facing Indiana. If you watched the Hoosiers against Iowa yesterday, you were able to see just how good and just how polished and just how skilled of a post player that Trayce Jackson-Davis is. But the Big Ten is just known for being that tough in terms of the number of really good big men in that league. When you look at Kofi Coburn, you look at Travion Williams at Purdue, you look at Hunter Dickinson at Michigan. There's so many different big men in this conference. Miles Johnson at Rutgers, another one. So many big men in this conference that are really hard for you to score on and physically impose your will on. But Kofi Coburn is one that if Illinois wants to go far in the NCAA tournament, they're going to need him to be playing his best basketball. And when shooters like Adam Miller and DeAndre Williams are making shots, when a guy like Andre Curbelo is coming on the floor and playing really good defense and getting steals, that is what makes everything much easier for this Illinois Fighting Illini team. And I'm telling you right now, the pieces are there in terms of having the star player in Dosunmu and having the really good shooters in Frazier and Miller and Williams, and having a really good big man in Kofi Coburn, and having a scorer in Trent Frazier and Ayo Dosunmu, guys like that really have the ability to go off at any time. I think Illinois could be a team that I am having my eye on as a possible Final Four contender. It's not in the Final Four, it's not all four teams that make it are usually teams that you expect to make it. I think most people are going to look at Gonzaga and Baylor as the two favorites, and rightfully so, but there are going to be two other teams that may come as a surprise to some people, and Illinois, I believe, could definitely be one. The Illini have been a team with some hype really from the start of the season, and I'm really looking forward to see what they could do going forward.